My name's Andrew Leong. I'm an assistant professor of English at the University of California, Berkeley. And today I'll be speaking about the highs and lows of Issei experience, art and class consciousness in the Los Angeles novels of Shōson Nagahara. A few biographical details about Nagahara Shōson, whose birth name was Hideaki. So he was born in Hiroshima Prefecture in a small town named Yamanouchi Nishimura. He came to the United States in 1918, just after there were a series of rice riots during an inflationary period in Japan. And most of his class background, based upon the census data and employment records that I've been able to find, suggests that he was decidedly working class. So he joined his father and another relative in the mining town of Magna, Utah. He worked in a role that Emily mentioned before as a maintenance worker or an engine cleaner for the Southern Pacific Railroad in Los Angeles. And he was listed as a single bachelor, lodger in a boarding house in North Main Street in Los Angeles. What I'd like to emphasize in this slide here is how Nagahara Shōson's immigration status, especially following the Immigration Act of 1917, can lead us to think about ways that the idea of the identity of the immigrant and the idea of the identity of the author or the artist might be in a place of tension or contradiction that it would be helpful for us to think more deeply about. So the Immigration Act of 1917 is quite a long act, but the portion that I want to focus on today is the long section 3. So written in the context of the Russian Revolution, leftist movements throughout the world, and increasing concerns about lower class immigrants being drains on American society, the Immigration Act of 1917 barred, and this is the long quote, idiots, imbeciles, feeble-minded persons, epileptics, insane persons, persons with chronic alcoholism, paupers, professional beggars, vagrants, people with tuberculosis, polygamists, anarchists, prostitutes, persons hereinafter called contract laborers, and natives of, quote, specified Asiatic districts. So at stake with some of the preaching that Emily was talking about of trying to convince Issei bachelor immigrants not to drink, not to be arrested for vagrancy, and not to engage in leftist or anti-government behavior. Or another way that the Immigration Act also set up a kind of series of class differences or differentials between good immigrants and bad immigrants. Or to be more precise, people who were not classified using the name immigrant at all. So in the same section, there's a list of people who are accepted from the status of immigrant or imin. So, quote, the provision next foregoing shall not apply to persons of the following status or occupations: government officers, ministers or religious teachers, missionaries, lawyers, physicians, chemists, civil engineers, teachers, students, authors, artists, merchants, and travelers for curiosity or pleasure. In other words, tourists. Um, so technically speaking, from the viewpoint of the Immigration Act of 1917, it was impossible to be both an immigrant and a recognized artist. And the idea of an immigrant author or an immigrant artist would have been a contradiction in terms, at least from the viewpoint of this act. Of course, this is different from the colloquial or the everyday ways that we use the words immigrant or artist. And of course, there were people who were immigrants that were also artists. But I want to point this out in order to explain why or illustrate some of what Emily was talking about with the emergence of something like an immigrant consciousness or class consciousness uh, between different kinds of artists, different kinds of workers, and different kinds of people living in Los Angeles. So let's take a closer look at Nagahara Hideaki's or immigration record. So here, and I apologize that it's difficult to see, um, initially it's written that he has no occupation at all, at least in the typewritten version of it. But in handwriting, very faintly, it's crossed out and said student, which, which means that he would be accepted or allowed to enter the United States, at least in the terms of Immigration Act of 1917, under the status of being a student. This is, of course, in tension with the fact that he's going to a town in which there's not a major educational institution. He's going to Magna, Utah, um, which was mainly a mining town. Okay, so here we can find more information about his birthplace, his father, the fact that he would have been what we call a Yobiyose Issei, or somebody that was summoned by a previous Issei, in this case his father, to live in the United States. So to fill in some of the details from that immigration record, Yamanouchi Nishimura is in the northeastern region, a mountainous farming region of Hiroshima Prefecture. And here's a picture of the Yamanouchi JR station. Here is an image of Magna, Utah, which is famous for being one of the largest open pit mines, copper mines, in the world. Here are more detailed records of where Nagahara Shōson may have lived in 1201 North Main Street, which is, as you can see, relatively close to the Japanese American National Museum. And during this period, these freeways, of course, would not have existed. There was major urban renewal in this area at that time. So Nagahara's status as a writer is complicated by the fact that his main forms of sustenance were as a railroad worker and later as a gardener. And so he never really earned enough money, despite writing up to 6 long novels serialized in Japanese American, Japanese language newspapers. And in a way, even though we might count him as belonging to the same cohort or being active at the same time as Issei immigrants who settled in the United States on a permanent basis, the remaining information I've been able to find about Nagahara Shōson is that he applied for a reentry permit to the US in 1927, which means that he probably departed Japan and may never have, sorry, he departed the United States, returned to Japan, and may never have come back to the United States afterwards. This slide tries to give a sense of how prolific Nagahara Shōson was in various different names and different forms of genres, short stories, novels, zuihitsu or essays, haiku, and shingeki or new forms of modern plays. My focus today will be on depictions of class difference in his novels. In particular, a novel called La Casa Golondrina about a bohemian art society in Boyle Heights, which is across the river from Little Tokyo. Yoru Naigeku, which was published as his only separate bound volume or tankobon novel, and then a novel serialized in the Rafu Shimpo called Osato-san. So I owe a lot to the Japanese American National Museum. My initial research for Lament in the Night and Osato-san was spent in front of a microfilm machine to take all of the images of the Osato-san serialized installments. Now this is much easier because of resources like the Hoji Shimbun digital collection and digitization of the Rafu Shimpo and other newspapers, which really allows us to broaden our understanding of what these works look like. Okay, sorry about this duplication. Okay, here's a kind of set of images of what the three early serialized novels, Red Smoke, Wilderness, and La Casa Golondrina, look like. La Casa Golondrina is particularly interesting because, in keeping with our theme of transbordering, it starts with a kind of expression of interest of an artist society, the title named La Casa Golondrina, that is composed of Issei Bohemian artists and writers who are especially interested in the arts of Mexico, France, Italy, and other Latin nations. Here's an image of Nagahara Shōson with members of the New Tendency Haiku group, Agostosha. This is a retreat to the beach, probably White Point Springs, which was featured in a slide earlier in one of the earlier panels. And here's the last trace that I've been able to find of Nagahara Shōson, indicating that he returned to Japan to manage an independent theater company sometime in late 1927, early 1928. Now I want to talk about a couple of interesting scenes in Lament in the Night and Osato-san. So I first learned about Lament in the Night from an entry in an annotated bibliography of the Japanese American Research Project, which was edited by the historian Yuji Uchioka, working with others at UCLA. The note here says that it's a novel with a hero as a petty thief and penniless bum, an example of the rarely mentioned Issei failure. So I translated this novel along with Osato-san in 2012. And one scene that I think speaks to an overlap with Emily's presentation is how the titular Issei failure, Sakuzo, responds to being preached at by the sidewalk preachers that appeared in Emily's presentation. So the Japanese begins about here, but I've translated this as in front of the XX watch store, a sidewalk preacher was beginning to speak. Sakuzo, thinking he had time to kill, leaned against the store window and listened. One of the preacher's young followers raised a Bible high up into the air and cried out over and over again, God is love. We must all believe in God, stopping only to wipe the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. The next part is Saxo had no clue what the young man was saying. It seemed like a crazy talk of someone touched in the head. Okay, the next sequence is from Osato-san. But the point that I wanted to make about the Yori no Neku scene is that this stages a difference between the so-called Issei failure or the working class vagrant or underemployed alcoholic. Um, and the status aspirations of the sidewalk preacher or the religious teacher, which you'll recall from the Immigration Act of 1917 is an exempted status. So in Osato-san, the serialized novel here, the key character is the titular character, Osato. Osato is a young immigrant that is coming after having been married to one of her cousin, Ryosaku. And this really puts a kind of clear image of the distinctions between different kinds of classes of immigrants and non-immigrants who traveled across the Pacific. So Osato observes as she's the ship that she's on is in the port of San Francisco, quote, "At 2 in the morning, the first class passengers disembarked. An elderly woman dressed in a Japanese kimono stood out from the crowd. She seemed to be a traveling artist of some sort. Then there was a young man who looked like some kind of banker. He pranced about with a snobbishly affected briskness." So Osato and Ryosaku's reflection is, as, quote, immigrants, Osato and Ryosaku, indeed all of the second and third class passengers, were strictly forbidden from leaving the ship until dawn. They would not be able to step foot on the actual soil of America until the following morning. So let's recall again what the Immigration Act of 1917 and how Nagahara Shōson is highlighting the difference between barred immigrants or suspect immigrants and non-immigrants, that is, ministers or religious teachers, students, authors, or artists or merchants who are not subject to the same forms of class-based exclusion. So this raises interesting questions about how Nagahara Shōson participates in forms of self-fashioning as an immigrant writer or an immigrant author in 1924 and 1925. Here we can look at an advertisement that was produced in the Nichibei Shimbun and Rafu Shimpo in 1925 for the publication of Yoru ni Nagaku. Some interesting details are here. It lists his belonging to this Bohemian art society, which he previously written a novel about, La Golondrina Dojin, which means that he's a member of La Golondrina, and also Enteishi Kurabu Dojin, that he's a member of the Gardeners Club or Gardeners Federation. He also situates Lament in the Night, or the blurb advertising copy, describes it as the art of agony, or Kumo no Geijutsu desu. So some interesting details that will hopefully connect the question of immigrant and author identity with some of the figures that previous panelists have talked about who are tied to Wakayama is that even though Shōson himself was from Hiroshima, there was translocal and transprefectural contact among artists and writers throughout Los Angeles. So one of the details is that Soudosha, or the publishing house in Los Angeles, lists its address as 303 East First Street. The Shakudosha magazines that previous panelists have shown, associated with the artist Uyama Tokyo and others, is based in the Bunrindo bookstore, which has the same address as Soudosha. And there's evidence that Uyama Tokyo uh, participated in exhibitions in Bunrindo in the 1920s as one potential site um, for the artist associations that he was participating within. So, further interesting details are it's quite possible that Uyama Tokyo, before he established the bookstore, gift store Bunkado, which still exists in Little Tokyo today, that he worked as or listed his occupation as a salesman in a bookstore, not as an artist. And it's quite possible that maybe he worked at the Bundindo bookstore in the 1920s and early 1930s. It's also interesting that when he was returning from Japan, he didn't list his occupation as bookstore salesman, but embraced his status as an artist in his 1937 movement. So what's particularly interesting is that in the context of Lament in the Night, there is a figure that seems to be closely modeled on the Wakayama artist Uyame Tokyo. Uh, there's a character named Shimomura who's a successful painter who paints in the Western style, who went to Pennsylvania art school in the same way that Uyama Tokyo did, which suggests that there's a kind of close allusion or relationship between Nagahara Hideaki or and Uyama Tokyo. Now, the next slide is more speculative. I'm not quite sure why the publishing house of Lament in the Night is called Sodosha, because in the painting world in the 19 teens and 20s, this would have been recognizable as a famous art group of the 19 teens to 1920s in Japan, associated with realist Western painting. So the members of the Sodosha in Japan, and I'm again not sure if there's a relationship between the Sodosha in Japan and the Sodosha press in the United States. But I wonder if the interest of the Sodosha painters in realist painting might have been a kind of inspiration for Uyama Tokyo and other participants in the Bunrundo exhibitions, and other things along those lines. All of this is to say that we can open up lots of interesting questions if we track the multi-level identities of immigrant authors who often were gardeners, engine cleaners, sales clerks, but also artists, painters, and writers. And this is a way that we can think about the broader theme of transbordering, not just between different spaces, but across different kinds of class identity uh, based in different forms of space.
Okay,
Thanks so
great.
much. That's my presentation.
Thank you both to Dr. Anderson and Dr. Leong. Can I bring both of you back and we'll take some questions from the audience? There's a question from Grace Yamamura. The question is, what happened to Nagahara Shōson? Does he just disappear?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So uh, at first, all that I had as a kind of reference to Nagahara is, excuse me, that he returned to Japan or applied for a reentry permit to the United States, which is something you would do at the time that you departed to Japan in late 1927. Thanks to resources like the Hoji Shimbun digital database and the digitization of the Rafu Shimpo, I've been able to find essentially like advertisements or notices for farewell parties for Nagahara. So Agostosha, Sodosha, and Horo no Shisha, like the Wandering Poets Society, all held joint farewell banquets for Nagahara in late 1927, which probably doubled as year-end banquets at I think Sankodo, so like a Japanese-Chinese banquet hall um, which was located on East First Street. I haven't been able to have much success figuring out which theater company, if any, Nagahara ended up becoming a director for in Japan. I've looked at the Tsuboichi Shoyo theater archives in Waseda and others. But if anybody has further ideas about where I could look or do further research in order to pick up Nakahara's trail, I would really appreciate that assistance.
We have a question in the Q&A for Dr. Anderson, but first I'm going to just turn it over to Dr. Aoki, who has comments on the Shodosha. Zodosha, sorry.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, actually, so when I saw the advertisement of the Sodosha, so I also got interested in why it is called Sodosha. And so I think I didn't mention you about this exhibition, which I curated with my colleague Miyamoto-san. And so the paintings got motion. And so it introduced the artist mainly from Kitayama, Seitaro Kitayama. He was also our exhibition coordinator and also the editor of the magazine, and also the exhibition catalog he produced a lot. And so he also worked on the Sodosha exhibition too. So the year of the creation of the Sodosha was much earlier. And so that is why I didn't think it's connected. However, so looking at the portraits, so you laid on, so that probably there could be some necessity that we'll reconsider. So, and it's a good way of good connection again for us. And the Kitayama Seitaro was also from Wakayama City. But he didn't have any chance to go abroad, actually. And he was one of the three first Japanese cartoonists. And so this exhibition introduced, from how Japanese modern artists, modern art painters adapted Japanese Western art into Japanese art, and also how they developed the creativity, especially so focusing on the artistic, the value. And so, the Taisho period, the Taisho era was a period of that Japanese artists started to recognize their artistic, the personality. So anyway, but so thank you so much about, connecting, giving us a new connection to Wakayama and the California probably.
Yeah, I think it's you're definitely right that the Japanese Sodosha group wrapped up in I think 1920 or 22, something like that. And so that's 3 years before the publication of Lament in the Night. So I don't think that it's the group directly, but anybody that was involved in painting, especially a Western style painting, would have known of the Sodosho group. And so there might be an homage, if not like a direct connection. I think that would be interesting to pursue as a possibility.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Anderson, this is for you. From my understanding, religious leaders, temples and churches, medical doctors, and Japanese newspaper reporters played important leadership roles for the early immigrants in Hawaii. How and what kind of activities did Christian churches, especially the Methodist Church, support the first generation of Japanese immigrants, mainly of whom were not Christian? I'm now researching an Okinawan immigrant, Shūsei Yamashiro, who was a medical doctor and a devout Methodist Christian, finally involved in the Salvation Army.
Thank you so much for your question. And for the most part, Christian churches that focus a lot of work on immigrants coming first from China and then from Japan were also the denominations that had sent missionaries to those countries originally. And so there was already sort of there are people who had learned the language, who had actually lived in those countries, and they actually called the West Coast an area of sort of home mission. The Methodists, for example, had what was called the mission to the Japanese living on the West Coast. And they engaged in the kinds of work that they also did in Asia in order to attract people to come and to see them as friends and to try to gain interest or sort of a sense of familiarity and comfort before they try to convert people. So this was through in the case of for immigrants, this included boarding houses, a place to stay, English classes. Those are the two primary needs of immigrants immediately was a roof over their head and a way to learn the language. For example, the West Adams Church, we have in our collection a log. I apologize, my cat who was just fed is being loud. There we have a logbook actually that records who stayed in which room when they first opened and had a boarding house, and you know there are a lot of immigrants who, while they themselves are not interested in religion, had no interest in converting, but they sent their children to Sunday school because it was supervised activity time. There are also for example, Maryknoll, which is a Catholic school, there are a lot of there's a Maryknoll in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, and also in Hawaii. A lot of immigrant parents sent their children to those schools. Again, they were not interested in becoming Catholic, but there are places that would look after their kids after school hours. So so Methodists, Presbyterians, the Congregationalists, and then eventually Baptists and some others all had missions in Asia. And so those were the ones who had some initial already contact and then provided really practical needs for immigrants when they first arrived. And Salvation Army is also one that we tend to forget about, but there were Japanese Salvation Army branches in LA, San Jose, San Francisco as well. And there was, but there was one in Japan that then branched out and connected with those branches in the US. So thank you for your question.
Okay. Thank you so much for those great questions. Do the panelists have any final thoughts or comments to make? Okay, great. Then thank you both. Thank you, Dr. Anderson, Dr. Leong. And now we'll move to the closing remarks for our session. And so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague at JANM, Masako Miki.
Thank you very much for joining today's symposium. I would like to thank everyone, but especially all the panelists and those who joined from Japan for getting up so early. Before closing this symposium, I would like to bring all the panelists available to the screen again to share their final thoughts on this symposium. パネリストの皆さん、もしまだいらっしゃいましたら、ぜひカメラとマイクをオンにして、最後に一言ずつシンポジウムについてコメントをお願いいたします。じゃあ、画面に見えている、maybe start from Emily, or anyone who want to start?
Okay, I will. I just think this is a great example of what can happen with a bilingual and transnational group of people. I think there is more work that certainly needs to be done, or there's work that's been done on both sides that we're now connecting. And it used to be that Andrew and I would be the two lone people who do Issei in addition to Asian stuff, and now it's a much bigger group, and it's really exciting to see the direction that the research and also just public facing exhibiting can go when we work together in these kinds of collaborative ways. So this is really exciting. It's just too bad we couldn't do it in person, but I'm glad that we were still able to hold this. So yes, thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Can we go to 一郎さん？
はい、一郎です。今回こういった連携、これまで続いてきたことから、またさらに深まる機会が持てて本当に嬉しく思って、それを今回パネラーの皆さん、そしてこのシンポジウムに参加してくださったビューアーの皆さんと様々共有できて嬉しく思っています。で、やはりこうして日本からいろんなところに渡った人たちたくさんいるんですけども、そういったところにはですね、必ずその生活とやっぱりその美術とか文化というのはやはり必ず生まれるんだなということをこういった調査をしながら、常々思っていまして、そういったところをですね、さらにまた掘って深く、調べて、していければと思っています。それからこれまでの話もありましたけど、今の問題ですね、この移民をめぐるさまざまな問題、世界各国、日本も含めて起こっていますけれども、そういったところへこうした試みから、想像力を広げて、取り組んでいくことができれば一番いいのかなということで思っています。ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございます。樋口さん、お願いいたします。
はい、今日はありがとうございました。いろいろな方のお話を伺えたのもすごく勉強になったんですけれども、参加者の方がすごくたくさんいらっしゃって、でこんなにたくさんの方が移民とか今日は話にあったようなことに興味を持ってくれているんだなっていう気づきを得ることができました。興味ある方の研究とか調べていることの手助けになれるような活動を市民図書館としてはしていきたいと思っております。ありがとうございました。
efforts of the library and archive to make further contributions to enhance the interest of those people who are interested in the immigration.
ありがとうございます。山下さん、お願いいたします。
はい。和歌山市立博物館は今、ヘンリー杉本の会が中心に、コレクションがありますけれども、和歌山市はたくさん移民に出ていった人いますし、そういった方々の資料の収集っていうのはもっともっと行っていって、さらにこの移民を取り巻く現代の問題も含めて、そういったものに、なんていうか考えていくのに、様子がなるような、展示でしたり、活動でしたりっていうのが今後ともできていったらいいなと思いますし、まずはそのね、ヘンリー杉本、もっともっとね、和歌山市の皆さんにも知ってもらいたいですし、よその方のね、見てもらえる機会っていうのもたくさん増やしていけたらいいなというふうに考えています。今日はありがとうございました。
Thank you, 山下さん。桜井さん、お願いします。
So the many people from the coast of southern Wakayama, although there are many, who went to the US, Canada, Australia, and Philippines and other countries, and many of them actually didn't have passport. And it's not easy for us to get the information of them who went there without passport. But nevertheless, because we've been continuing, collecting artifacts, and particularly I found one interesting photo album of a man who left Taiji, who's a father of Chris Sugita, who is probably listening to this. And he said, I was from a fishing community. I tried to be an artist or socialist, didn't work out. And I'm, hanging out in Southern California. But, we will continue to pay attention to those guys, and because we want to know who they are. And again, they are totally, reminds us of what's going on in the US, what's going on with those, 15 women from Myanmar in Taiji, and so we'll continue to do that. And thank you again for, involving us, this, hometowns of Tamil Island, the southern coast of Wakayama. It's a great opportunity for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for doing important work. Let's do Andrew.
Thanks, everyone. I also share the excitement about what can happen with these kinds of conversations that really combine careful attention to specific places in Los Angeles, California, Wakayama, and these trajectories. I really learned a lot, and in particular, I had always thought of Ishigaki Eitaro and Ishigaki Ayako in very, very different terms. I had never really thought of the Wakayama component of their career. So thinking in these terms was really exciting, and I hope to continue to learn more in the future.
Yeah, we also hope to continue to do programs around it too. Christine.
Okay, well, I think the Japanese American National Museum is definitely not alone in, preserving this history. We have so many like sister organizations and colleagues here in the United States that are doing this work, and we feel it's so important to share and preserve this history and share it with other Americans. But I think, so many of us also feel a strong connection to Japan because of our families, our relatives, and ancestors. So I was so struck visiting Wakayama and learning about all these colleagues in Japan that are really helping to, not only preserve this history, but they've taught me so much about the history, about our collection here at the museum through their great research. And so it really shows that when we combine our expertise, whether it's our disciplines, our language, our, all of that together, we've just really been able to, I think, bring so much more, knowledge and so much to this history. And so it's, something that I just have been enriched by for the past 3 years. And so we really wanted to bring, all this to new audiences. And so that's why we, created this program for the symposium today. So anyway, thank you everyone for joining us today. It's been really great to hear all your presentations.
Thank you, Christine. Before handing over to Kana, I just want to say we understand the partnership collaborations are not always easy, but curators like you and Okumura-san and Yamano-san, director at the MoMA, are always willing to collaborate with us, not only exhibitions, but also educational programs and collection research activities and this symposium. We truly appreciate this partnership. I want to ask for a round of applause for Kana, who has been tirelessly working to lead this symposium planning and who has been also leading various transborder initiatives. So Kana, last year comment.
Thank you so much, such a big words. Yeah. Anyway, ありがとうございました。とにもかくもなんかこう、終わったというので、私もほっとしているんですけど、やばい、泣きそうみたいな。そうですね。私よくこのテーマに関わるようになって繰り返し、気がついてからあちこちでお伝えしたいと思って言っていることがあります。日本語でコミュニティと言った時にそれは、常に単数形のコミュニティという言葉ではしかなくて、だいたいそこのローカルな近隣の地域社会のことを、指します。ですがこうやってジャナムや移民史研究の皆さんと一緒にお仕事をするようになって、折に触れてコミュニティーズとか Our communities and your communities とかね、複数形のコミュニティというものに、考える機会をたくさんいただきました。 で、そのことを私たち日本の、ミュージアムはより一層意識していかないといけないと思っていまして、もちろん美術史研究自体も面白いんですけれども、私たち、日本社会に特に地域に根ざした公立館で仕事をしている、こういう図書館や博物館の職員はもっとこう広い人やテーマのつながりというものから、コミュニティというものを常々複数形のコミュニティーズとして、仕事をしていく必要があるんじゃないかということを、改めて今日のシンポジウムを終えて、再確認というか再認識した、次第です。で、急にこのオンラインに変わるとか、さまざまテクニカルな部分も含めて、スジャノムの皆さんお疲れ様でした。ありがとうございました。で、私の、ですね、結構オペレーションが常に悪くてですね、和歌山チームの皆さんにはいろいろお世話をかけているので、こちらもお詫びつつありがとうございました。で、今回このシンポジウムの最後アンケートを書いてくださいってさっきも言ってたんですけど、とにかくこの、フィジカルなブロシャーを受け取ってくださいと思っています。たくさん吸ったので無駄にしたくないのでよろしくお願いします。はい、今後とも、この私ども和歌山の移民研究を通じていろんなつながりを作っていく機会を持っていければなと思っていますので、またよろしくお願いします。長々と失礼しました。
For the further development of the partnerships.
ありがとうございます。So we have one announcement from Christine.
Okay. I don't think that Aoki-san and Okumura-san plugged their exhibition catalog, but this is the Transbordering exhibition catalog that is just really stunning and has really informative essays as well. So I think if you're in the United States, the Japanese American National Museum bookstore or store has copies for purchase. And I imagine if you're in Japan, you can obtain a copy from the Museum of Modern Art Wakayama. But anyway, please, support the exhibition by purchasing the catalog.
Thank you, Christine. We are going over the time, so let me mention our upcoming programs very briefly. JANM is currently closed to the public for renovation and will open in late 2026. While the museum's galleries are closed, we are continue our activities throughout the US, Japan, and online. This includes the ongoing exhibition Pictures of Belonging at the Smithsonian's American Art Museum and facsimile exhibition of our collection in Nagoya in Japan. Please check the JANM On The Go website for the update. Also, we are hosting our global website Discover Nikkei 20th anniversary hybrid event Discover Nikkei Fest on February 8th in the US and February 9th in Japan. We have several Nikkei panelists from US, Australia, Peru, Argentina, and Brazil. You can find the information on JANM website. And today's symposium's video will be posted onto JANM's YouTube channel after we add subtitles. So please look for it if you'd like to watch it again or share with other people. Finally, we would appreciate if you could take a moment to answer the symposium survey. The link is, you can put on the chat. And thank you so much for joining us today. Anyone, do you have any final comment?
Yeah, Masako, another person mentioned that they are not having trouble with the link for the booklet. Okay. Joy, can they just email you with their address so that we can get them copies? Since, as Kana said, they were printed, we don't want them to go to waste. So I just want to make sure that we don't, lose people because they're having technical challenge.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you have any questions after this symposium ends, please feel free to email us and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much. I hope you have a rest for the rest of the weekend and Monday as well.